Hello, I'm Chris Callahan, also known as Mr. C, and this is the King and the Queen. Well, today we are talking about the heavy hitters. No pawns today, only the two most important pieces on the chessboard. Before we talk about how these two pieces move, let's talk about just telling them apart, because they do look quite similar. Every chess set is different, but very generally, the king usually has a cross on his head, and the queen usually has a circular crown. Of course, there are always going to be some weird chess sets where they make the king and queen look as weird as possible, but don't blame me for that. Blame the people who made the chess set. So how do they move? Well, they move the same way with one small but very important difference. The king goes in any direction, but only one square, like so. The queen also goes in any direction, but she goes as far as she wants. So yeah, small but important difference there. The way I look at it is that the queen is young and fast and athletic and can dunk a basketball, and the king is an old man. So how do old men move? Well, they go one step at a time, one step at a time, slowly, slowly. The king and the queen start the game in the middle of the board behind the pawns. But this isn't quite as simple as it sounds. How do we remember which piece goes on the right and which piece goes on the left? Well, there's a simple phrase we remember, and it is queen gets her color. Just remember that. Queen gets her color. This takes a little explaining. You see, this chessboard we're using here has squares that are green and white, but chessboards can be all sorts of different colors. So we call the squares dark and light because whatever colors they use, one will be dark and one will be lighter. So what queen gets her color means is that the white queen goes on a light square while the black queen goes on a dark square. We should also remember how to set up the board while we're doing this too. The phrase for that is light on right, which means the lower right-hand square should always be a light one. Another thing that has to be mentioned when we're talking about these pieces is why they are so important. Now, I think if you saw all those arrows I drew on the chessboard a moment ago for the queen, you can pretty well understand what's so great about her. She can go all over the place. She's the strongest piece, easily. But what about the king? King is okay, but what makes him so important? Well, he's actually the most important piece in the whole game. And the reason is he is how you win. Now, I'm not going to go into details about how exactly this works. You'll have to wait for the videos on check and checkmate. But suffice to say, the way you win a game of chess is to get the king, which makes him, of course, the most important piece. So here's the game. You are the white king, and you are in danger from the black pieces. And you need to save yourself. But of course, you can't just go anywhere because you could move to a square where you will just get taken by a different piece, and that's not progress. So you need to look carefully at all the squares to see which ones are safe. And I have helpfully left a whole bunch of black queens around to confuse you as much as possible. So I'll give you a moment to think. Pause your videos if you like. Well, if you draw lines to show where all the black queens can go, it should make it pretty clear that the only safe square is right here. Okay, same sort of thing. Your king is in trouble. What are you going to do about it? Where is he going to go? I will give you a moment to think. Pause your videos if you like. Well, let's draw some more arrows. It's kind of unfair that I get to draw arrows and you guys don't, but that's the name of the game. So if you draw all the arrows, I think it's pretty easy to see that the only safe square for the king is right here. Here's another one. Take your time. Draw the arrows in your head if you can. How do we save this king? I'll give you a moment to think. Pause your videos if you like. Well, it's arrow time. Here we go. Those guys right there. These guys over here. This queen there. Any other ways we can slice it up? I think that's enough. The only safe square is this one right here. A question that sometimes gets asked when I do this activity is, isn't this a bit silly, Mr. C? When will there ever be 4 queens on the board? And I admit that it's unlikely that you will play a game with 4 queens, but it is possible. And the reason it's possible is, of course, because pawns can promote to queens. So I'm going to give you a little bonus question here, and I'll put up the starting chess position, which should help you think. Here's the question. How many queens can you possibly get for both sides, all the queens added up, if you are playing a legal game of chess? What is the maximum, the most number of queens that you can possibly have? I'll give you a moment to think. Well, the answer is 18. And you can add it up pretty easily. You start with 2. So you get those 2 and you hang on to them somehow. And then we somehow promote every single pawn into a queen. How many would that be? Well, there are 8 pawns on both sides, 16 pawns total, plus the 2 we start with, and you get 18. I think that should about do it for Kings and Queens. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and best of luck with the most important pieces in the game of chess.